The morning rain streaks down the tall windows of Providence Municipal Court as Judge Frank Caprio prepares for a case that has captured the attention of the entire community. The docket reads simply, Victoria Ashford, charged with fraudulent use of a disabled parking placard. But the story behind those words reveals something far more troubling about privilege, entitlement, and the invisible struggles faced by those who sacrificed everything for their country. 12 days earlier, on an unremarkable Tuesday afternoon, Victoria Ashford guided her white BMW X5 through the crowded parking lot of Providence Place Mall. Rain drummed steadily against the windshield as she searched for a convenient spot near the entrance. Her eyes settled on one of two handicapped accessible spaces, the blue and white wheelchair symbol painted clearly on the pavement. Without hesitation, she pulled in. From her rear-view mirror dangled a disabled parking placard, the kind issued only to those with documented mobility impairments. Victoria gathered her designer handbag, stepped out into the rain with confident, easy strides, and disappeared through the mall's automatic doors. Security cameras captured every moment, recording a woman who walked without difficulty, without assistance, without any visible sign of disability. What those cameras would record over the next 3 hours would spark outrage throughout Providence and beyond. Minutes after Victoria entered the mall, a specially equipped van pulled into the parking lot. Behind the wheel sat Thomas Kim, a 74-year-old Korean War veteran who had lost both legs to combat injuries in 1952. For 72 years, Thomas had navigated a world not designed for wheelchairs, maintaining his dignity and independence through sheer determination. The accessible parking space Thomas needed was not a luxury or a convenience. The extra-wide area beside these designated spots allows wheelchair users to deploy vehicle lifts and ramps. Without that space, Thomas physically cannot exit his vehicle. It represents the difference between independence and isolation. But on this rainy afternoon, that space was occupied by Victoria's BMW. Thomas circled the parking lot slowly, windshield wipers beating a steady rhythm. The other accessible space was legitimately occupied by a vehicle displaying proper credentials. He waited 5 minutes, then 10, then 15. Finally, he pulled his van alongside Victoria's BMW and activated his emergency flashers. A nearby shopper named Janet Rodriguez was loading groceries into her car when she noticed the interaction that followed. Something in the scene troubled her enough to pull out her phone and begin recording. Thomas lowered his window and addressed Victoria, who was returning to her vehicle carrying a single, small shopping bag. His tone was polite, respectful, and hopeful. "Excuse me, ma'am. Do you have a disability that requires this accessible parking space?" Victoria barely glanced at him. Her response, captured clearly on Janet's phone, would become evidence of something deeply wrong. "I'm just running in for 5 minutes. Relax. I'll be gone soon." Thomas explained his situation carefully. He had been waiting 15 minutes in the rain. His wheelchair lift required the extra-wide access space. He had a medical appointment and was already running late. Victoria's second response revealed the casual cruelty that privilege sometimes breeds. "Well, I'm here now. You'll have to wait until I'm done. It's not my problem you showed up when the spaces were full." She turned and walked back into the mall, leaving a disabled veteran sitting in the rain. What Victoria claimed would be 5 minutes became an ordeal that exposed the stark reality of her deception. Security footage from multiple angles documented her movements throughout the afternoon with damning precision. At 2:45 p.m., cameras showed Victoria browsing leisurely through Nordstrom, trying on jackets, examining accessories. Outside, Thomas sat motionless in his van, rain streaming down the windows. At 3:30 p.m., Victoria settled into a chair at the food court, enjoying a leisurely lunch. Thomas remained waiting, His phone pressed to his ear as he called his wife to explain why he would miss his dialysis appointment. At 4:45 p.m., Victoria moved through a shoe store, trying on multiple pairs, chatting with sales associates. Thomas had not moved from his position beside her BMW. For 3 hours and 12 minutes, Thomas Kim waited. He missed his crucial dialysis treatment, a session he required 3 times weekly to stay alive. He missed follow-up appointments that took weeks to reschedule. He watched the rain fall and wondered how someone who could walk so easily could be so blind to the struggles of those who could not. At 5:27 p.m., Victoria finally emerged from the mall, laden with shopping bags from multiple stores. She loaded her purchases, started her engine, and drove away without a backward glance at the veteran who had waited over 3 hours for her to keep a 5-minute promise. Only then could Thomas Kim access the parking space he needed. Only then could he finally attend to the errands that had brought him out in the rain. Janet Rodriguez, the witness who had recorded the initial confrontation, felt compelled to act. She photographed Victoria's license plate and the disabled parking placard hanging from her mirror, then reported the incident to Providence Police. Officer David Chen took the case. His investigation revealed troubling details that transformed what appeared to be a single incident into a pattern of deliberate fraud. The placard, displayed in Victoria's vehicle, was registered to Eleanor Ashford, Victoria's 82-year-old mother-in-law, who suffered from severe arthritis and used a walker for mobility. When officers contacted Eleanor, she confirmed she had never given Victoria permission to use her placard and had been searching for it for weeks, assuming she had misplaced it. Further investigation uncovered parking records showing Victoria's BMW photographed in handicapped accessible spaces at 3 different locations over the previous 6 months. In each instance, the same placard was visible. When Officer Chen contacted Victoria 2 days after the incident, her response demonstrated a stunning lack of understanding about the gravity of her actions. "It's my mother-in-law's placard. We're family. What's the big deal? Those handicapped spots are always empty anyway." The charges filed against Victoria Ashford were comprehensive: fraudulent use of a disabled parking placard, parking in a designated accessible space without authorization, and harassment of a disabled person. As she enters Judge Caprio's courtroom, Victoria carries herself with the confidence of someone accustomed to problems disappearing with the right lawyer and the right check. Her attorney, Stephen Walsh, follows close behind, briefcase in hand, prepared to negotiate a quick resolution. Judge Caprio observes her entrance with careful attention. She walks with fluid ease, no hesitation, no assistive device, no indication whatsoever of mobility impairment. The contrast between her effortless movement and the placard she fraudulently used is stark and damning. The bailiff calls the case. Judge Caprio reviews the charges methodically, ensuring every detail is clear for the record. Before he can proceed far, Attorney Walsh rises with practiced smoothness. "Your Honor, my client acknowledges she made an error in judgment. She is prepared to pay whatever fines are appropriate and complete any community service requirements to resolve this matter efficiently. Mrs. Ashford is a busy woman with significant community commitments, and we hope the court will consider her willingness to take responsibility." Judge Caprio's response cuts through the attorney's polished language like a scalpel. "Mr. Walsh, your client is charged with stealing a parking space from a wheelchair-bound veteran while he sat in the rain for 3 hours. This is not an error in judgment. This is a deliberate choice. This is cruelty masquerading as convenience." The courtroom falls silent. Attorney Walsh sits down, recognizing he has fundamentally misjudged both the judge and the severity of the situation. Judge Caprio addresses Victoria directly, his tone measured but firm. "Mrs. Ashford, do you understand why you are standing before this court today?" Victoria nods, with what appears to be practiced contrition. "Your Honor, I used my mother-in-law's parking placard. I didn't realize it was such a serious issue. I'm certainly willing to pay whatever fine is appropriate and move forward. The judge sets down his pen, his gaze unwavering. You didn't realize it was serious to take a parking space from a disabled veteran. You didn't realize it was serious to force a 74-year-old man in a wheelchair to wait in the rain for 3 hours? Victoria shifts uncomfortably, her confidence beginning to crack. Your Honor, I didn't know how long I would be. Things just took longer than I expected. Judge Caprio picks up the security footage report, his voice taking on an edge of incredulity. Mrs. Ashford, you told Mr. Kim you would be 5 minutes. The security footage shows you shopped for 3 hours and 12 minutes. Which part of that timeline represents 5 minutes? Murmurs ripple through the courtroom gallery. Victoria's face flushes as she realizes the extent of the evidence against her. I lost track of time, Your Honor. It truly wasn't intentional. Let's examine what was intentional, Judge Caprio responds, gesturing to the clerk. Please play the security camera footage. The courtroom monitor flickers to life, displaying the parking lot security camera footage. The timestamp reads 2:15 p.m. as Victoria's BMW pulls into the handicapped accessible space. The footage shows her walking into the mall with confident, normal strides. No difficulty, no hesitation. Minutes later, Thomas Kim's specially equipped van enters the frame. The footage captures him circling, waiting, finally parking next to Victoria's BMW with emergency flashers activated. Through the rain-streaked windows, his silhouette is visible, motionless, waiting. Then the screen splits. On the left side, Victoria moves through various stores, browsing, trying on clothes, sitting for lunch. On the right side, Thomas remains in his van, unmoving, waiting in the rain. The timestamps march forward with cruel precision. 2:45 p.m. Victoria examines purses at Nordstrom. Thomas waits. 3:30 p.m. Victoria enjoys lunch at the food court. Thomas waits. 4:15 p.m. Victoria browses through a bookstore. Thomas waits. 4:45 p.m. Victoria tries on shoes. Thomas waits. The split-screen presentation continues for the entire 3 hours and 12 minutes. The contrast between Victoria's leisurely shopping and Thomas's patient suffering creating a visual narrative more powerful than any testimony could provide. By the time the footage ends, several people in the gallery are openly crying. The callousness displayed is overwhelming, made worse by Victoria's complete unawareness of the suffering she was causing just meters away. Judge Caprio allows the silence to hang in the courtroom for several moments before speaking. Mrs. Ashford, what do you see when you watch that footage? Victoria's voice carries a defensive edge. I see myself shopping, Your Honor. I didn't know he was still waiting outside. You told him you would be 5 minutes. Did you forget making that promise? I got caught up in what I was doing. Judge Caprio's voice sharpens. You got caught up shopping while a 74-year-old disabled veteran sat in the rain, waiting for you to honor your word. The judge turns his attention to the gallery, where Thomas Kim sits quietly in his wheelchair, wearing his Korean war veteran cap with simple dignity. Mr. Kim, would you please come forward and tell the court what happened that day? Thomas wheels himself to the front of the courtroom. When he speaks, his voice carries the quiet strength of someone who has endured far worse than a parking lot confrontation, yet still feels the sting of disrespect. Your Honor, I've been in a wheelchair for 72 years. I lost my legs in Korea when I was 19 years old. I've never asked for special treatment, but those accessible parking spaces represent something crucial. They're not about convenience. They're about independence, about dignity, about the basic ability to live our lives. He pauses, gathering his thoughts. My van has a wheelchair lift that requires the extra wide access space. Without that room, I physically cannot exit my vehicle. I'm trapped. That day, I had a medical appointment for my dialysis treatment. I require dialysis 3 times weekly to stay alive. I was already running late because of the rain. Thomas glances briefly at Victoria before continuing. When I saw Mrs. Ashford in that space, I thought, perhaps she had a disability I couldn't immediately see. Many disabilities are invisible, but when I asked her about it, when I explained my situation, she told me I had to wait. She told me my medical needs were not her problem. Judge Caprio's voice is gentle. Mr. Kim, how long did you ultimately wait? 3 hours and 12 minutes, sir. I missed my dialysis appointment entirely. I had to reschedule for the following day, which created a cascade of scheduling conflicts with my other medical treatments for the entire week. During those 3 hours, what did you do? Thomas's response is heartbreaking in its simplicity. I waited. I called my wife to tell her I would be late. I watched the rain fall. I thought about how, when I was 19 years old in Korea, people thanked me for my service. Now I'm 74, and someone who walks perfectly fine made me wait in the rain because a handicapped parking space was more convenient for her shopping. The courtroom is absolutely silent. Victoria stares at the floor, unable or unwilling to meet Thomas's eyes. Mr. Kim, Judge Caprio says, his voice carrying both gratitude and sadness. Thank you for your service to this country, and for your patience with this court today. You may return to your seat. As Thomas wheels back to the gallery, Judge Caprio turns to address Victoria again. But before he can speak, a man in the back of the courtroom rises to his feet. He has been sitting there quietly throughout the proceedings, and his sudden movement draws everyone's attention. He is well-dressed, appears to be in his mid-40s, and his expression combines devastation with determination. Judge Caprio acknowledges him. Sir, do you wish to address this court? The man's voice trembles slightly, but his words are clear. Your Honor, my name is Marcus Ashford. I am Victoria's husband. I have been sitting here listening to everything, and I believe I need to speak. Victoria spins around, her face draining of color. Marcus, what are you doing here? Marcus walks down the center aisle without looking at his wife. He addresses Judge Caprio directly. Your Honor, I did not know Victoria was using my mother's handicapped placard. My mother has been searching for that placard for weeks. We all believed she had simply misplaced it. If I had known Victoria was using it to steal parking spaces from people who genuinely need them, I would have stopped her immediately and reported her myself. Judge Caprio studies Marcus carefully. Mr. Ashford, why are you here today? Marcus's voice carries the weight of shame and disappointment. Yesterday, my mother told me she had seen news coverage of this case. She recognized her placard in the photographs. She told me what Victoria had done. I came here today because I needed to see for myself whether my wife truly did what the reports claimed. He looks at the monitor, which still displays a frozen image of Thomas waiting in the rain. Now I have seen the evidence and I am horrified. Your Honor, my father was a Marine. He taught me to respect veterans, to honor those who sacrifice for others. The fact that my wife forced a Korean War veteran to wait in the rain for 3 hours while she shopped. The fact that she stole my disabled mother's placard to do so. The fact that she told this man his medical appointment was not her problem. His voice breaks. I did not marry someone capable of such cruelty. I do not know who this person is standing before you. Victoria attempts to interrupt. Marcus, please, we can discuss this at home. Marcus cuts her off firmly. No, Victoria, I have heard enough. He turns back to Judge Caprio. Your Honor, I want this court to know that whatever sentence you impose, she will receive no support from me in fighting it. She deserves every consequence. And when she leaves this courtroom, she and I need to have a very serious conversation about our future together. The gallery erupts in whispers. Victoria is crying now, but these appear to be tears of panic and embarrassment rather than genuine remorse for her actions. Judge Caprio thanks Marcus. Mr. Ashford, I appreciate your integrity in coming forward. Your testimony speaks to your character. You may sit down. Judge Caprio spends several minutes reviewing all the evidence systematically. The security footage proving Victoria used a fraudulent placard for over 3 hours. The parking records demonstrating this was a pattern spanning 6 months. The audio recording proving her dismissive and cruel treatment of Thomas. Marcus's testimony confirming she stole the placard from her disabled mother-in-law. When he finally delivers his sentence, it is comprehensive and designed not merely to punish, but to educate. For fraudulent use of a disabled parking placard, a $2,000 fine and 60-day license suspension. For parking in an accessible space without authorization, an additional $1,500 fine. For harassment of a disabled person, an additional $1,000 fine, and mandatory disability awareness education. Total monetary penalties: $4,500, plus attorney fees and court costs. But Judge Caprio is not finished. Mrs. Ashford, you will complete 120 hours of community service at the Veterans Administration Hospital, specifically assisting disabled veterans with transportation and mobility needs. You will write a formal letter of apology to Mr. Kim, to be reviewed and approved by this court before your case is closed. And you will complete a mandatory disability sensitivity program that includes spending a full day navigating Providence in a wheelchair, experiencing firsthand what Mr. Kim faces every single day of his life. Attorney Walsh attempts to object, but Judge Caprio's response is immediate and uncompromising. Mr. Walsh, your client stole parking spaces from disabled individuals for 6 months. She forced a 74-year-old veteran on dialysis to wait 3 hours in the rain. She told him his medical needs were not her problem. Every consequence she faces is proportional to her choices and necessary for her education. As Victoria is processed out of the courtroom, Marcus Ashford approaches Thomas Kim. The two men speak quietly. Marcus, offering to cover any expenses Thomas incurred from the missed appointments, and assuring him that his mother's placard is now secured, where Victoria can never access it again. Thomas's response demonstrates the grace that has carried him through 72 years in a wheelchair. Mr. Ashford, I appreciate your offer, but what matters most to me is that people understand those parking spaces are not conveniences. They are necessities. Your wife learned that today. I hope others learn it without needing a courtroom to teach them. 3 weeks later, Victoria begins her community service at the VA hospital. During her first week, she moves through the requirements mechanically, still resentful, still not truly understanding. But by week 5, something begins to shift. She listens to veteran stories, hears about their sacrifices, their daily struggles with accessibility, their fights for independence. By week 10, she meets a veteran named Robert who served in Korea alongside Thomas Kim. The stories he shares about their service, about Thomas's injuries, about the decades of dignity Thomas has maintained despite his losses, begin to penetrate Victoria's shell of privilege. When Victoria completes her mandatory wheelchair day, something finally breaks through. She wheels herself to a store entrance and discovers the only accessible space occupied by a car, displaying no placard. She waits 20 minutes for another space to open up, experiencing a fraction of what she put Thomas through. For the first time, she truly understands. 4 months after her sentencing, Victoria requests a meeting with Thomas Kim. They meet at a coffee shop, and Victoria arrives in the wheelchair she used during her sensitivity training, wanting to meet him on equal terms. Mr. Kim, she begins, her voice carrying genuine emotion. I forced you to wait 3 hours in the rain so I could shop. I stole my mother-in-law's placard. I told you your medical appointment was not my problem. I was wrong about everything. I am profoundly sorry." Thomas listens carefully before responding with words that encapsulate the entire lesson. "Mrs. Ashford, I have spent 72 years in a wheelchair. I have encountered people like you throughout my entire life. People who view disabled parking as merely extra convenient spaces. But those spaces represent independence. They represent dignity. They represent the difference between being able to live our lives and being trapped, isolated, dependent." He pauses. Then adds, "Judge Caprio taught you that lesson. I sincerely hope you never forget it." 6 months after her sentencing, Victoria has completed all court requirements. Her license is reinstated. Her marriage to Marcus remains intact but changed. Both of them in counseling, working through the breach of trust. Her relationship with her mother-in-law Eleanor is slowly rebuilding. Remarkably, Victoria continues volunteering at the VA hospital, even after completing her required hours. She has learned something her privilege never taught her. Accessibility is not a suggestion or a convenience. It is a fundamental right that enables independence and dignity for millions of people. The case of Victoria Ashford and Thomas Kim became a watershed moment in Providence, sparking community conversations about accessibility, privilege, and respect. Local news coverage prompted the city to increase enforcement of disabled parking regulations and launch public education campaigns about the genuine needs these spaces serve. Victoria's story demonstrates that accountability can lead to transformation when justice is applied with both firmness and purpose. She entered Judge Caprio's courtroom believing she faced a simple parking fine. She left understanding she had committed a profound act of disrespect against someone who had sacrificed for his country and struggled for his independence every day for over 7 decades. That 3-hour shopping spree, while Thomas Kim waited in the rain, became the catalyst for a 3-hour courtroom lesson that changed Victoria's understanding of privilege, accessibility, and basic human decency. Thomas Kim, meanwhile, continues his life with the same quiet dignity he has maintained for 72 years. He requires no recognition, no special praise. He simply asks for what should be afforded to all people: respect, consideration, and access to the spaces designed to ensure his independence. This is the essence of justice, not merely punishment, but education. Not merely consequences, but understanding. Not merely holding someone accountable, but showing them why that accountability matters. Victoria Ashford learned that disabled parking spaces exist for people who need them, not for people who find them convenient. She learned that 5 minutes of someone's promise can become 3 hours of someone else's suffering. She learned that privilege does not excuse cruelty, and that veterans who sacrifice their mobility for their country deserve more than dismissive disrespect in a parking lot. Most importantly, she learned that some lessons can only be taught when privilege finally meets accountability, when excuses finally encounter consequences, and when someone with power is finally required to see the humanity in those without it.